everyone to this opportunity to present a good friend, Dr. Michael May, who I have encountered at dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings over the 17 years that I've worked in putting together the World Stem Cell Summit, and very often had strong collaborations with the nation of Canada. Michael leads CCRM and is perhaps one of the great pathfinders in our field to be able to commercialize the field of stem cells and regenerative medicine. So Michael, I'd like you to basically also introduce yourself and your background and tell us about the organization that you lead, CCRM.
Sure. Bernie, it's a pleasure to be here, and as always, a pleasure to have a conversation with you about the industry. You know, I started focusing on commercialization back when I did a PhD, my PhD in biomedical engineering at the University of Toronto. And I spun a company out of the laboratory that I was working in, a tissue engineering company called Rebound Therapeutics. But upon entering a PhD, I set a kind of a goal for myself to figure out this very challenging space between academia and the market and industry, and trying to bridge that gap. And so I did a PhD to start companies and be an entrepreneur. And really that's been the focus of my career. And did a PhD to take care of the hard science associated with what we were doing, realizing that the entrepreneurial part, the business part, could be kind of learned on the fly with good mentors and experience. So that's my background. A lot of public-private partnerships, and for the last 10 years have been focused on leveraging all those in the trenches learnings in company creation to establish the Center for Commercialization of Regenerative Medicine, which is really known now as CCRM. And CCRM is a public-private partnership. Its mission is to accelerate the development of this, the promise of cell and gene therapy and stem cells.
And of course, in Canada, right?
We're headquartered in Canada. We're headquartered in Toronto, but as I think we'll talk about, CCRM has very much a global vision, and I think that reflects Canada's view on the world as well. Canada has great science and a great legacy of science in regenerative medicine. The early work of Till and McCullough on hematopoietic stem cells really defined the stem cell. So great scientific legacy there, but a small market and a country that sits next to the largest market in the world, the United States. And so our approach to commercialization is really to be collaborative and to work together, not only as Canadians, but to look outward and to work with the partners in the world to bring our innovations, to the world. So we are based in Canada, but have very much a global mission. And so CCRM was created 10 years ago now. It seems like yesterday, but 10 years ago to, I can, focus a little bit more on CCRM, but really the idea behind CCRM was that if you get the ecosystem right, Bernie, if you get the network correct, the technologies and the opportunities kind of take care of themselves. And so that has really been the focus of CCRM, and the seed funding from the government was to create the right kind of network and ecosystem. And so in my view, the ecosystem is the product. And everyone focuses on individual projects or individual technologies. And I think if you get that ecosystem correct, everything else is taken care of.
Michael, that so resonates with the work at Regenerative Medicine Foundation and World Stem Cell Summit over the years, and viewing the field as an ecosystem. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview with you is because you actually have an orbital view and look at this from a global perspective. And it's not only geopolitical, the countries that are involved, but it's also each segment of whether it's industry, the academic centers, the patient groups, the medical community. You have a vision of combining all of these together to accomplish the goals of regenerative medicine and potentially curative. So as we look at CCRM, and let me understand the size and scope of what it is, where it is, and what accomplishments and projects you're working on now to help build the ecosystem and commercialize the field.
So we started with the understanding that you needed to create the network. So we established CCRM around a network of academic institutions, founded around those in Canada, but have kind of worked with institutions now around the world. But really, the idea was to have access to their intellectual property, and to be able to kind of nurture and guide intellectual property from those institutions. And then on the back of the reputation of the scientists in those institutions, and the reputations of the institutions themselves, we attracted industry and created an industry consortium. It started out as 13 companies, and it now is kind of well over 100 companies that we engage to really provide the market pull to balance the technology push of academia, and to be ready receptors for the projects and the technologies and companies that we move forward, and also to provide matching funds in this public-private partnership that we've created. But after several years of looking at hundreds of opportunities and now kind of spinning out companies and generating impact, over the last couple of years we've worked on creating kind of the third main network, and that's an investor network, because it's really private sector investment that is needed to fuel the model that we've created. Not just kind of seed investment from government or participation by industry. And so, it's this, purposeful, stage-wise, kind of development of these networks that is really at the core of CCRM. And, our networks, and I think it's important to focus on these networks, but we've evolved our engagement of those networks over the years. In the early years, we had a fee for being a part of our networks, and it was kind of a fee for benefit model. And we've evolved that to be more of an engagement model, that fees are important for kind of matching up what you're doing, but what we really wanted was to have all of these partners engaged in projects, and then support for that would come. So
Michael, how about, what I'm trying to understand a bit is what intellectual capital are you bringing to this, the team? And by bringing all these forces together, but you actually have to execute on it and connect these dots. So help me out to understand that.
Yeah. So creating the networks is one thing, but then CCRM has augmented that with a team that's now 115 people that provide gap filling expertise, and also specialized infrastructure to be able to take ideas or intellectual property or company concepts and de-risk them so that they are easier to fund, or to advance them towards either investors or partnerships with industry. So the CCRM team, we source intellectual property, we do diligence on it, we have in-house labs where we can do wet diligence on technologies, kind of try them out, and also advance them with that gap filling expertise. We have developed particularly manufacturing capabilities, which is really important and we should talk about. And that manufacturing capability comes from a focus on developing manufacturing technologies, i.e. the unit operations that are used to kind of select cells, expand cells, do downstream processing, and not only kind of individual technologies, but integrating those technologies into efficient, cost-effective workflows. And that effort has really been a partnership with technology companies, and including in particular Cytiva, which was previously GE Healthcare. And that group also does fee-for-service scale up and process optimization. But that manufacturing capability has also been extended and seamlessly connected to a GMP clinical phase manufacturing facility. So we have a facility that has 10 rooms, 10 clean rooms, and 2 of those are for viral vector production. And we serve both academic and industry clients in that facility. And kind of the team at CCRM that puts all this together is a team we call Scale, which takes the opportunities we find in all of this, these resources that we can bring to bear, and spins off companies, provides some seed investment, and tries to scale those companies and attract outside investment. So we have this kind of virtuous circle of support at CCRM, from identifying opportunities to supporting them to a stage where outside investment is possible.
This is really highly interesting. So give me a little more, an example of it. Let's say there's some great scientists at one of the wonderful universities in Canada, and they have an allogeneic stem cell product, a unique product. Now they're trying to figure out how they're going to commercialize it. And they come to CCRM and seek guidance, or maybe they've already started their company and they're further advanced or have intellectual property. How do you partner with them? How do you take them by the hand where they say, we need to take this to the next step?
Well, so we have a team that engages our academic partners all the time to identify kind of what they're doing, and not just the inventions that they're creating and evaluating those invention disclosures, but also working with them to kind of spark new ideas. But great idea to talk about an example, and a perfect example for this discussion is a company that was launched last September called Notch Therapeutics. And Notch Therapeutics is an allogeneic T-cell platform. And so CCRM, with partners, identified technologies, two technologies out of 2 different institutions. We identified that they were synergistic, and brought those technologies into CCRM, and actually did some of the early proof of concept work on those technologies that augmented, years of academic work that was ongoing, to kind of demonstrate the technology, but then also to package it for outside investment. And so we invested in a new company that was created. So it was incubated within CCRM for about 6 to 8 months. And then we put some investment in that company alongside some others. And ultimately the company was launched in September with a licensing deal with Allogene, which was, was a wonderful way to start a company with investment from Allogene, support for the development of the platform, and of course, future royalties associated and milestone payments associated with products, specifically of interest to Allogene. And so this is a kind of an iPSC to T-cell allogeneic platform, which the industry, is looking for. Now, after we've put this company together, the idea is to support companies in and create a capital efficient ecosystem. So we continue now with our manufacturing capabilities and our scale up capabilities, the GM facilities and back office support, all these different ways that we can support, we continue to support Notch. Ultimately, kind of through fee for service arrangements. So Notch is a great example of, and just final comment, 3 or 4 of our employees have, spun out with the company. So not only are we trying to support, the technology development side, but it's about training individuals that can then go on with these companies and be champions of them. So if I were to summarize, it's a perfect example of what CCRM is trying to do. Identify, proprietary technologies, develop them, de-risk them. Also, our team provides fee-for-service work for not only the companies that we are supporting, but established companies, large companies in the industry to help them advance their technologies. And that that fee-for-service work, provides us with some revenue, but what it really does is help build a reputation for us and help help us build our capabilities so that we can continue to, help the companies we're creating as well. And then the third piece that we're doing is we're acting as investors. We put in a little bit of seed funding, and that catalyzes, additional investment. And really that piece is in part about creating a model that is sustainable. And I want to stress that, because a lot of organizations like CCRM, they get money from government or elsewhere, they spend it, and then they ask for more money, or they dissolve. And CCRM right from the start has driven a sustainability model, and part of that is making investments and getting a return on those in the future, so that we can reinvest as a not-for-profit back into the ecosystem.
So what do you want to tell? What do you want to tell investors? If there's a fund in the United States, a venture capital fund, an investment bank, or individual investors that are interested in this space, what's the message to them?
Well, so the message to them is CCRM has got a visibility on very novel intellectual property and science, not just in Canada, where it's a bit under the radar, but also around the world. And then over and above that, we have the ability to advance these early stage concepts and companies with very unique gap-filling infrastructure and expertise. So in a way, being able, in a very capital efficient way, to be able to accelerate the development and therefore kind of represent an excellent partner for not only finding opportunities, but then supporting those opportunities. And because we have academic partners, we have industry partners and investors, but it's really important that CCRM is independent from all of those partners. And we act independently, and therefore this kind of neutral ground for helping as many companies and technologies and inventors as possible to advance their technologies. And we've built 115, team of 115, and tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure to be deployed, for these purposes.
You've taken this model and gone international with it. So I want to find out more about the CCRMs in other countries, and those, I don't want to say competition, but are there other models out there similar to CCRM? I think one of the key things that I've learned along the years is the uniqueness of CCRM and what it's been doing for our communities.
Yeah, so one of the unique features of CCRM is this understanding that the ecosystem is the product. There are a lot of obviously initiatives around the world to advance translation, but they often focus on projects or specific technologies, and that's kind of the way many of the governments think. They're a very a similar organization, which is great friends with CCRM, and we try to work together, would be the Catapult concept in the UK. And I think if there was any organization or any model that was most similar to CCRM, it would be the Catapult. And as I said, we're always trying to find ways to work together and create synergy in our missions. But this global thinking of CCRM, I think, is also unique, and it really comes back to our early ideas that if we wanted to scale this model and we wanted to create just expand kind of visibility of intellectual property and be able to attract a significant amounts of risk capital, and also to help companies access markets around the world. We are working on building the same, replicating the network building and the infrastructure building in what I would call CCRM hubs around the world. So, it's still very early stages. Creating one of these has been a great challenge, but so the idea of creating, hubs all over the world is daunting, but You know, we officially launched CCRM Australia a couple of years ago. That's our kind of first experiment, and we've learned a lot. But the idea is to have, you know, 5 to 10 hubs around the world that are sharing intellectual property, sharing expertise, and creating scale such that access to capital becomes more efficient. And ultimately, whether you create a company in Canada or we create one in Australia or Israel, you know, those companies are going to want to access the big markets, you know, North America, Europe, Asia. So this is the grand vision of kind of CCRM global, or this global network. And, you know, it's going to take 5 to 10 years more, but I think it really talks to the kind of the global vision that we have, and I think what the Canadian perspective can bring.
We're having this conversation at a time of a global pandemic. Mm-hmm. So the visions that we have, of course, carry on beyond the pandemic with the hope that things might get back to normal sooner rather than later. So this opens up a couple of questions. I'm interested in knowing what, if anything, is happening in Canada as it relates to the field that we're in, collectively, regenerative medicine, and treating COVID-19, or some of the medical conditions surrounding COVID-19, and also looking at the current situation. What is your vision for 2 or 3 or 4 years out for CCRM and our field?
So Bernie, that's a lot of questions, and that's kind of a loaded question in multi-layered. But, you know, just to carry from my last, you know, answer, you know, the pandemic is a global crisis, and, you know, I just talked about thinking globally and, you know, kind of supporting, you know, model that is compatible with globalization in all of its good ways. But globalization is under a bit of threat, and the pandemic is kind of pushing it that way. People, you know, afraid to work together. You know, some of the politics of nationalism or populism are, you know, I would say, stressing a vision like ours to have countries working together around the world. And I think the other thing that the COVID pandemic has done is made everyone reevaluate, you know, national kind of security, or access to supply chain, or access to medicines. And I raise that because CCRM spends a lot of time and a lot of effort thinking about manufacturing capability and building that manufacturing capability, not just with what we've done at the clinical phase and with respect to process development, but also thinking ahead to commercial scale manufacturing. So, you know, COVID has just, you know, has focused a lot of these issues around biomanufacturing and supply chain, you know, very, 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 very acutely. You know, Canada, you know, the governments of Canada have, you know, in a kind of a wonderful way, have put aside politics. They are all working very collaboratively at the provincial level and the federal level. Political parties are working together, and the governments have been putting, you know, a lot of investment into the economy to, you know, obviously to deal with the pandemic and the fact that people are out of work, but also are investing in you know, innovation around you know, COVID, not only treating COVID, but dealing with you know, PPEs and other supply chain issues. And so there are trials that have been funded. You know, I'm thinking of Dr. Duncan Stewart in Ottawa, which are, you know, really focused on MSCs to treat you know, the symptoms or the issues with pneumonia or ARDS associated with COVID. There are trials there that are being supported. There's a whole host of applications, some of which CCRM has been a part of, looking at additional, you know, future therapies or the development of novel vaccines. And you know, CCRM has also asked for support so that you know, our manufacturing platform can be enhanced for kind of quick access to a clinical product for treating COVID patients, and also thinking beyond COVID at the importance of biomanufacturing. One really interesting way that CCRM has helped is around the assays for the COVID-19 assays. Just being able to test whether people have COVID or not. And especially early on, but still with the ramping up of testing, there have been short supplies of the reagents to conduct those studies or those tests. And in particular, one of the early steps, this in RNA extraction step, suffered from kind of bottlenecks in supply. And so, CCRM runs, PCR tests. We run these tests on small samples because we work on cells. And so we've been working on and have successfully optimized the COVID assay to bypass that RNA extraction step entirely. And so that not only expensive equipment, but some of the reagents can be bypassed, and are close to sharing, my team has been doing that after hours.
That might very well be, Michael, that might be profound as this whole pandemic unfolds. Now, as a final question, I'm going to ask you, as one of our global leaders, to look into your crystal ball.
Yep.
2 or 3 years down the road, or as far as you want to take it. What is the future of our field?
Well, the future of our field is I think continued clinical efficacy, which has really been important to, driving investment into the field, through, the CAR T, platforms. But during COVID, we've had a resurgence of MSC based therapeutics, and those are going to be judged on their clinical efficacy. And so I think that we'll continue to have many more clinical trials and more clinical successes. This is, everyone would say this, but, all cell therapy products are going to be modified in some way. And so the interface of gene editing and new gene editing tools and the next generation editing tools with cell therapy is really going to come of age and going to drive function. And then on the flip side of that, the continued focus of groups like ours and others on manufacturing and lowering cost of goods is going to change the economics and the reimbursement of these products and their adoption broadly. And I do think that we CCRM and others have been focused on technology push, creating companies, creating technologies, and then engineering, how do you lower the cost? But I think that over the next few years, we need to think of it from the other way as market access and market adoption. How are we producing these products? How, at the right cost? How are they being delivered from within healthcare systems, either in a healthcare system like the US or single payer systems like Canada? And then, how are we, collecting the data to justify the price of these products and ultimately optimizing the supply chain, associated with the project. All of that, I think, is going to continue. We're going to see, amazing steps. But, one area where I see lots of activity right now is a drive across the board from a technological perspective is around allogeneic products. I think that I remember years ago in a panel with you, Bernie, and the debate was allogeneic or autologous. The result of that was, it's probably both. And, I think there always will be examples of both. But I'm wondering over the next several years whether we're going to tip the balance to highly engineered allogeneic platforms that really will change the adoption and availability of these products.
Michael, I appreciate all the time that you've spent in explaining the CCRM vision and your personal vision as it relates to our field. And I can only think of the many, many conversations we've had together with leaders of the field at many, many meetings, well beyond the World Stem Cell Summit and around the world. As we've talked about this is a time, even in a pandemic, where hope springs eternal, and that we know that this field might be the key to unlock the door to benefit human health. It's a paradigm shift. So I want to thank you for taking the time and speaking to us. And we will be speaking soon. We're going to catch up. Everyone in Canada, stay well. Everyone in the United States is trucking along. We're doing what we can. And we'll get together real soon.
Yeah, I look forward to that, Bernie. Thanks very much.